Well, I think we'll go ahead and get started. So Judd should be joining us soon, hopefully, but he is actually, he recently won, Gonzalo won the Impact Division of the Minnesota Cup, which is super exciting. And so today is the final, tonight is the final award ceremony. And so this morning he's doing a presentation. So he should be hopping over, hopefully right after that, if he has it in him still. So.
Right. That's so exciting.
Yeah.
We got two winners over here.
Yeah, I know. So great. All right. What was that?
I said Michelle won last year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's exciting. I'm sure he's going to knock it out of the park. So.
Yeah. All right. Well, we will go ahead and get started. Thank you everyone for being here today to learn from some awesome entrepreneurs who are using business to address social issues in new ways. My name is Katrina Becker, and I'm the manager of the FINNOVATION Fellowship Program, which is a 9-month leadership and entrepreneurial skills development program for early stage social entrepreneurs, based out of virtually now, but still out of the FINNOVATION Lab in downtown Minneapolis. And if you're not familiar with FINNOVATION Lab, we are a shared workspace with programming for entrepreneurs, organizations, and businesses who are working to make the world a better place. It was started by Jackie Berglund, who is the founder of Finnegan's Brew Co., which is one of the longest running social enterprises in Minnesota. All of the entrepreneurs that you'll hear from in this session are alumni Fellows. Michelle and Junita are from the first cohort in 2018-2019, and Alysha and Judd are from the second cohort, which wrapped up this past June. So again, Judd should be joining us soon. He is presenting at the Minnesota Cup right now, which is super exciting, so hopefully he will join us in a little bit. Yeah, so let's just jump right in. Could each of you share a little bit about yourself and your business? And then with that too, share how you came up with the idea for your business or the desire to start it. And Alysha, how about you go first?
All right. So my name is Alysha Price. I am the CEO and founder of The Price Dynamic. And I'm very, very happy to say that I am a Finn Fellow. It was an amazing experience. The Price Dynamic started, I like to tell people, was established in 1980. So I give my age up every time. But I believe that the Price Dynamic, or the concept, if you will, came when I was born. My parents were never married, and the purpose of the Price Dynamic is to support those who are either separated, divorced, or never married to cooperatively co-parent their children. So to raise children across households in a way that provides stability for children, as well as looks at kind of their social, emotional well-being and academic well-being. And the Price Dynamic is near and dear to my heart because I'm also a parent. I have a 17-year-old son who just started his freshman year, and his father and I were never married. And so I learned from my upbringing how to have a cooperative co-parenting relationship, and saw a gap in social services in that space and wanted to support. So that is the Price Dynamic and kind of how it got started.
Great, thank you.
I can go next.
Okay.
Okay. My name is Junita Flowers. I am the founder of Junita's Jar. We are a mission-driven cookie company, and we are all about creating conversations to educate and eliminate relationship violence against women. And so Junita's Jar was launched in July of 2018. Specifically, it is an opportunity for me to celebrate my journey of overcoming and latching on to hope and making it through an abusive relationship of 14 years. And so that I can empower other young people, because the 18 to 24 demographic is 3 times more likely to be in an abusive relationship during those years than at any other point in their life. I can equip them with tools that can reduce the stats overall, and then empower them to pay it forward and continue to do the same. So we have a cookie platform. We sell cookies as a retail company and cookie company to conversation events where we actually engage with college students in a 2-hour conversation series consisting of a therapist, a nurse practitioner, and a survivor, each of them speaking to the issue of relationship violence from their professional perspective. So thank you for joining us today.
Let's go Michelle and then Judd.
Hi, I'm Michelle Maryns. I am the founder and CEO of We Sparkle. We are a public benefit corporation that helps underestimated founders build their businesses with balance. So a lot of people are suffering, I know, from Zoom fatigue and trying to parent and homeschool and juggle starting a business. And so we provide a digital assistant that takes some of those tedious administrative tasks off your plate. So things like scheduling meetings or answering frequently asked questions from your customers, and optimizes your productivity in a sustainable way. So we give you gentle nudges to do more time blocking, take breaks and meditate, and this will help you increase your well-being overall. So really excited to be here today, and thank you for inviting us, Katrina, to talk about our experiences.
Great, thank you. And Judd, if you could just introduce yourself, a little bit about you and your background and your business and how you came up with the idea.
Sure. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here. Alysha, so good to see you. My name's Judd. I'm the founder of Vonzella. We are pioneering the first ever bail insurance product. We're actually launching our first product, hopefully October 1st. It's a cost sharing product where for a low monthly premium, you can protect yourself against the risk of having to pay cash bail and get stuck in jail. My background is as an attorney. I represented wrongfully convicted people, and I really followed that passion to get to this place surprisingly. I mean, it's kind of happened organically in a lot of ways, but I was a corporate attorney, not enjoying my job, and I decided to do something different. And I took a product management course and at General Assembly, which is a sort of like startup school. I was living in New York at the time. And while I was in this course, I thought about like how I could disrupt bail bonds. I was aware of what a problem it was and what a big cow it was for the wrong people. And that's how I fell into this. It's a combination, I think, of a passion, but also really trying to find a solution to things. And that's what I got into. So.
Great, thank you. Cool. So kind of off of that, how much do each of you feel like your past work or education experience has sort of prepared you for the work that you're doing now and helped you being an entrepreneur? Or do you feel like it's a totally new thing that you're doing in some ways and like no work experience could have ever prepared you for this? If you could just talk about a little bit about that, that would be great. Whoever wants to go first.
I think what Judd was saying about you start off in a career, we all start out on a path, and the more we work within whatever we've chosen, clarity begins to come, and there's some synergy around either what you're doing or you feel like, okay, I need to pivot some kind of way, and you don't always know what's next, but you start to move in a direction. So, much like Judd just explained, he took this class, kind of like me, I worked in nonprofit my entire life. It took some life experience, but you start to just follow kind of this thing. Like, I don't know what it is, but I feel like this nudge, this leading, this thing to kind of pivot and do something different. And the more we begin to dig deeper and explore or trust what's on the inside guiding us, we begin to fall into that space. And that's been my journey. So it's as talking about a topic of relationship violence and building a business, it feels like I'm doing two separate businesses all the time. It's a ton of work, but because I have been kind of following that thing on the inside that kind of guides you, that helps to balance all of the hard things that it takes to build a business.
Yeah, I would have to say I completely agree. It is extremely, it almost feels like there's just this magnet inside of you. Like you've been doing the work, you're familiar with practices or a particular field. However, until you jump into it and you become, just so kind of pulled to do your own thing, you do feel like you're working in two different spaces all the time. For me, I think that my previous role helped me to have an understanding of what a leadership position might look like, and also what it took to, align with other organizations and partner. But it also illuminated for me a gap of services to families. And because of that, I just knew that there was really a lane for me, but it was a little bit difficult in figuring out, how do I pave that lane, right? But for sure, working in social service, I've had experience in that space, as well as what it meant to collaborate with other social service organizations. So there was some initial understanding, but you just don't know till you do it.
Yeah, I agree. I think my previous work, I was the Chief of Strategic Initiatives at MEDA, which is a nonprofit community development financial institution that helps minority entrepreneurs succeed. And I've worked with hundreds of entrepreneurs, helped lots of startups. So you would think I'd be pretty well prepared for becoming an entrepreneur myself. And I definitely think that experience helped, but you don't really understand it until you're in it and you're going through all the ups and downs. It's just something that you have to experience and wade through, because every business is unique and every person's journey is unique. And so you come across things that other people haven't. But it is really helpful to have some of that previous experience working with startups and other founders to understand, and be a little bit more prepared for that.
Really fast. Like I think I had a job where I guess what I want to say is don't underestimate whatever skills you might have in your current job or whatever you've built over time, because I had a job that made me think I was pretty incompetent in a lot of ways, or maybe just like really one track. And so incompetent in other things. And you learn on the fly, but also you have a lot in your skill set that you might not realize. So
thank you. Great. So looking back on when you first had the idea for your businesses, or this kind of pull or desire to start something, solve this problem that you saw, what would you say was like sort of the best thing that you did right up front, or something that you had wished you had done right away? Like besides applying for the FINNOVATION Fellowship, like what sort of advice would you give to somebody who is in that position of like feeling that pull, feeling, that they want to do something and have an idea, but also feeling kind of like hard to prioritize, like, okay, where do I even start? What do I do? Do you have any thoughts on that and how that went for you?
For me, the hardest thing, but it was kind of the best learning that I've had, was to talk about what I'm doing as much as I possibly could. When you're working, I think in the social enterprise, social entrepreneurial space, sometimes you're very protective of whatever your idea is or what it is that you're doing, because it's so near and dear to your heart. And so you have a tendency sometimes to hold a lot of those ideas or your stressors to yourself. And I learned really quickly that I needed to get a lot of what I was feeling and thinking out of my head, and I needed to be, verbalizing those things. And the more that I started to do that, the more people were willing to help. The more that I understood people were aligned with my mission, and they started to, really support me to make the right types of connections. It was just a really hard learning, like, don't hold everything, it's okay to share. And the more that you do that, it just opens up this world. And what that has started to create for me, is I've been kind of calling it my personal board of directors. Now I have this team or this group of people that I don't feel uncomfortable saying I have this crazy idea. What do you think? And really respecting their feedback. So I think that's the biggest learning, and also something that was really, really difficult for me.
Oh no.
We lose you, Junita?
We want to not know a lot about social entrepreneurship. Can you hear me?
You're just cutting in and out just a little bit.
And apparently there's,
Can you hear me still?
Yep.
yeah, apparently there's a lot of feedback too from, I don't know who it is,
Shall
but
we unmute?
maybe we just mute unless you're talking.
So networking was probably the biggest thing. In 2015, I was a divorced mom, brand new divorced mom of 2 children. I had been at home with my kids for like 9 years, so I had to re-enter the workforce. And the last thing that I needed to do was volunteer for something or donate my time because in shambles. But I trusted my instinct. I made a decision to say yes to a strategic partnership where I had to volunteer, but that I trusted my gut enough to know, to align with this organization is probably a smart. I have to work a little bit harder because I'm volunteering over here. I'm willing to do it. And I did that. And I did that for 2 years. And that was one of the best decisions that I ever made. It paved the way as I began to enter into social entrepreneurship 2 years later. I had key contacts. When I did apply for the fellowship, everyone on my panel, I had met, I had moderated a panel. I had done something with each one of those leaders in my group. So the first time that they had heard about this thing Junita is doing that didn't quite make sense, cookies and relationship violence, they knew what I was doing because I spent those 2 years networking. So trust your instinct and know what your strategic yeses are and just move into them, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it's painful, to put in the time, and it pays off. I promise you.
Yeah, I think going along the
I
line.
would say, go ahead.
Go ahead. Oh, okay.
I was just going to say, I would get an advisor that you can like kind of rely on as you deal with critical foundational decisions. The other thing I think that was really, as a, I'm a lawyer, or that's my background. So incorporating your company, making sure you're following all the legal obligations is a really good guidepost at the beginning too.
Yeah, I agree with what everyone's been to me. I think, Judd, kind of getting your back office in order, that's something that Elaine Rasmussen often talks about from Connect Up and Social Impact Strategies group. But yeah, just documenting and getting kind of your ducks in a row. I knew that I wanted to start a business at some point, so I've been saving for a while. Like, even if you can just save a little bit, that can help provide you a little bit of security. Like, I volunteer, I teach high school and middle school students, and I always tell them, even if it's just like a tiny bit, start saving now, because you want to be able to have options later on and not feel like, oh, I have to stay in this job because it's the only way that I can keep a living and survive. And so whatever you can do, even if it's just a little bit, just start saving. And the thing that I think that I did well when I first started was really talking to customers. I think that's super important. Even if you just have an idea, just kind of, set up like Zoom dates or things like that, and try and meet with people or email them and see, hey, is this something that would be helpful to you? Would you be willing to pay for it? And just getting to know your customer really well, because that will serve you well in your business and being able to serve them.
Great, thank you. So what do you all think is different or unique about social entrepreneurship as compared to just entrepreneurship? Like starting a social enterprise, what are the unique challenges you face, if any, when you're trying to balance having a social impact kind of at the core of what you're doing with also trying to be financially sustainable and sell something to customers and all of that? Could you talk a little bit about that tension or any challenges that you've found through that?
Sure. I deal with that, I would say, very regularly. It's not just all about dollars for us, obviously. Like that's the number one point. Vonzella is a public benefit corporation. We are tied to our mission, not to our shareholders even exist. I think, though, that it is a very challenging word to lead with often if you're running a for-profit business or a phrase to lead with. I think social enterprise really throws off sometimes like the people behind the dollars who only care about dollars. So it's, you know, there's a challenge about how to describe this as a win-win for the investor, even though it might not be the SaaS platform that they think is going to like become a unicorn in 3 months. So that's a big challenge. I would also say though that like it places for-profit social enterprises in a difficult position because often the community partners that you would want to work with distrust you because of your for-profit nature. So I think it's like a very, and that makes a lot of sense because for-profit entities have been really predatory to a lot of people over time and really not in our financial interests. So I think it's a really challenging like thing to lean on. So that's been my advice in general is like, you can adhere to it in your heart, but like, it's not necessarily the best thing to lead with in trying to grow your business.
One of the things that I've run into quite often as a woman with talking about relationship violence, people are always as if I did. I know, and I'm so okay with what I've the good thing. So as they used to, that people still have want to good that you haven't thought your business plan out, or you're a that just wants to save the world while not taking care of, and neither of those are. So education that have to be prepared to share, because we believe in what we're doing, but also in just the whole platform as a whole, and help people understand what that when people make a purchase my company or when they attend a cookies and conversation event, I can help them feel good about the choices that they says they want to make a difference and support violence. They can do that. Being like something dessert, use their money for good too, because that's supporting our movement. I get to partner with people in changing the stats and doing it as when I single day.
And I can absolutely piggyback off of the fact that you have to be willing to educate at all times. You cannot be exhausted with telling your story. It is so paramount to the success and to really tapping into your target market, being able to share what your story is and how you came to do this work. You will feel 100% like you are on a recorder. And you have to continuously find new ways to reinvent your story and be willing to do that. I think that's extremely important when it comes to social enterprise, social entrepreneurship. You have to be willing to share why this is important to you and to tug at the heartstrings of whomever you come in contact with. And sometimes that song and dance can be very difficult. That was and still is sometimes something that I struggle with. Although I'm an open book and I love to talk about my family, and that's why I started this business, because I really believe in family. But sometimes it's exhausting, you know, sharing your story or being willing to go deep all of the time. And so I would just say, find new ways to reinvent your story, to make it fun for yourself and continuously be creative in that part of the work.
Yeah, I think I just add to that there are many facets to your story, and you know, kind of like what Judd and Junita and Alysha mentioned, you know, not everyone's going to understand your whole story. They might only understand a part depending on who you're talking with. And I've had the same struggles as Junita and Judd mentioned, you know, where people think, oh, you're a social enterprise, like, oh, you must be a nonprofit, like you aren't making any profits and things like that. But there are a lot of social enterprises that are huge that have IPO'd, get great returns, companies like Patagonia and Ben and Jerry's and Etsy, which IPO'd, So I don't think people always know the whole story. And with some people, the social enterprise part of your story will resonate with them. And those are the people that are really, working to build, the next economy, the new economy, because things don't always have to be done exactly the way they've been done for the past few decades. We are moving in, we're not in an industrial revolution anymore. We're moving into the next revolution, and you can either join us and see that come to fruition, or you might be left behind, because I think more and more young people are realizing that they want their companies and businesses that they patronize to be responsible and to care for both people and planet, in addition to profit. So I could go on and on about that, but I think that you will find people wondering, what is a social enterprise? But I think the more we talk about it and the more we showcase different businesses and see these new models, people will see that it is successful and it is a viable option for our new economy.
Great, thank you. Some of you kind of mentioned this, but could you each talk about how your business is structured, like you nonprofit, LLC, benefit corporation, and why you chose to structure it that way?
Sure. So Vonzella is a Delaware public benefit corporation. So it's a C Corp. Delaware is a business advantageous place to incorporate. It's that most Silicon Valley advisors would tell you to start a Delaware corp if you're starting a for-profit company, just for your benefit. And we're a public benefit corporation because, like I was mentioning earlier, that allows you to really emphasize and adhere to your social mission, as opposed to just bottom line shareholder value.
So Junita's jar is an SPC, but we're in the process of converting to an SPC, so specific benefit, my certificate. It's just another way to communicate a level of transparency. And so what's doing what I was doing, I continue to be able to, in the reporting, comes in contact.
We Sparkle was an LLC filed in Minnesota last year. That's kind of how we got started. And then as of January 1 this year, we are a Delaware C Corp, public benefit corporation.
And the Price Dynamic is an LLC, and I have been exploring the corporation. I have, and don't mind sharing, I've struggled throughout the last year with what type of business it made the most sense for the Price Dynamic to be, and had to just become really comfortable with not being a nonprofit. I had worked in that field for so long and knew how to navigate and speak that language. And so I kept feeling pulled to convert to this nonprofit world, but it just didn't make sense. And so I put up this fight with myself, and the better side won. And I'm learning more and more about how to structure the business, but currently we're an LLC.
And it looks like there's a question in the chat about, is there a conflict between a public benefit corporation while also setting up as a Delaware Corp? And sort of a question around taxes. Can Michelle or Judd, can you either of you speak to that a little bit?
So I actually would say I don't know the complete answer to the tax implications of it. I mean, you would also have to pay the state that you're operating in, which would, for us, would be Minnesota. So even though we're a foreign corporation, but we're operating in Minnesota. So, but I appreciate that question. I'm going to look into that more. I want to better understand that. But I think the first and foremost reason why you do it is so that you can run a sustainable business that still meets a social mission. Mm-hmm. And we find, at least in our market and our the impact we're trying to do through a financial product, you really couldn't do it in a nonprofit way. So that's been our experience.
Yeah, I would echo that. You know, we are headquartered and based in Minnesota, so we still pay Minnesota taxes. And even though we're a tech company, so we don't have a ton of like tangible things we buy, whenever we do purchase or source, you know, contractors, vendors, other people, we always look local. So that's how we kind of support our local community. And the Delaware C Corp is really something that as you grow and if you start talking with certain investors, the reason why they encourage you to go through the Delaware C Corp route is it's just there's a lot of the papers and terms that are kind of already set up. And so if you're interested in working with investors, certain investors, that's really the route that you need to go. But if you're not, there's no reason. I mean, we were an LLC before, and it wasn't until we kind of needed to work with an investor that we filed as a Delaware C Corp. So you can stay an LLC for a long time until you get to that point where someone's like, hey, we can provide you some access to capital, but you need to file there.
So one kind of maybe two last questions before we open it up for audience questions is what have been some highlights or like the best parts of being an entrepreneur and doing what you're doing? I know I think we talk a lot about like challenges and barriers you face, but what are some of the good parts and why do you keep doing what you're doing and stay motivated?
Share because I would say trust the process. So in March of this year, we all know COVID hit, and I have two kids. I have two high school students, and so everything is in school term. So we thought it was an extended spring break, and so I'm thinking, okay, based on kind of what's coming down, I'm probably going to lose 75% of my projected revenue for the year. That's not a sustainable business. Smart way for me to live. What do I do? I was panicking and trying to figure it out. And this is what's going on. I did the video. Really hard. I really need you guys to step up and support. My customers showed up. They started making purchases. And then George Floyd's murder happened. And my cookie production facility is right across the street from where he was murdered. And so that changed like how I even can go to work. So now I'm trying to figure out how am I going to make money. Now how I get to work is impacted. And I really was ready to quit. I'm like, you know what? My daughter's a senior in high school. I just want to focus on that. This is way too hard. Every time I get 5 steps forward, I go back 6, it feels like. But then I forgot that I applied for this Pepsi grant. And all of a sudden, on a day when I was actually doing a Zoom chat with my intern, and I actually said to her, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna have to cut our meeting short tomorrow because, you know, I have to follow up on this email that I have. They're probably just gonna tell me that because they have a question about the application question. They're probably gonna tell me they didn't pick me. And I'm like, why can't they just read my application and just send me a rejection? This was my response to her. That's how my mind had gone to the negative. And long story short, it ended up being that I was one of 15 women that were selected to be a part of the Stacey's Rise project. So that infused $10,000 grant into my business. But the biggest part of that was I got 2 Pepsi executives to meet with me as mentors, which has been life-changing. And even the scale that my business is moving through just since that happened in July, but since May is phenomenal. So it goes back to trust the process. It is really hard and we all work really hard. And when you're in the trenches, you're going to get the no's more frequently than you get the yeses, especially in the startup building phase. But you know you're supposed to do it. If you really trust the process, the resources are there and they do fall into your path. So be encouraged and stick with it because it does pay off.
Mm-hmm.
I would say purpose. Like I just generally feel significant purpose on a daily basis about what I'm doing with my work. So I certainly didn't feel that way working at a corporate law firm. That's my biggest thing. I enjoy going to work.
For
Yeah.
me, go ahead. Should I go? Okay. So I would agree with both, of course. For me, it's I learned so much more about myself that I thought this scrapper kind of gritty mentality that I've always had and worked super hard for other people was just something I did because I had a job and I had to show up well. But in the last year, I've really realized that I can do that same thing for myself and to make, good within my community and impact families that I come in contact with. Staying faithful to your mission and not giving up. And each day waking up and realizing that you stuck with it. Something about that just like keeps you in the game. And during COVID, I too got a little, leery or cautious and was thinking to myself, okay, I'm trying to launch this business during this time. Maybe I should just start applying for jobs. However, the more that I talked out loud with some of my fellows and individuals that I had began networking with and sharing these ideas that I was having, I got, just kind of this encouragement and confidence to throw these ideas at the wall, and whichever one stuck, ride the wave. And so I just started doing that and was able to begin training individuals in schools how to better work with single and co-parenting families. And that is a segment I hadn't considered. I did not know that the Price Dynamic would be able to launch into this training space. And so far, that has been the revenue of my business. So I recently received CARES Act funding, and I'm partnered with Hired Workforce Development Center and training their Hennepin County staff and Ramsey County staff to effectively engage with single and co-parenting families. I learned that their organization, 85% of their clientele are single parents. And so their staff were struggling during this time to figure out how do we really touch base with families that are experiencing COVID. And I was able to pivot into that space, and it's just been a blessing. And so I would just say, stick with it. Don't be afraid to pivot and be flexible and willing to pivot.
Definitely. What gets me up in the morning are helping people, and I'm especially passionate about helping underestimated founders. So women and people of color and other estimated founders. My mom was a small business owner, but when she immigrated to the US, she didn't feel confident continuing her business. And I always wondered what she could have accomplished if she had. And so for me, just hearing customer feedback is what gets me up in the morning. And it's definitely been a tough year for everyone. And so just knowing that our product helps people take some things off their plate, makes their lives a little bit better, increases their well-being, that makes me feel good. And that's what keeps me going every day, I think is really kind of the best part, is just hearing that customer feedback and knowing that you're helping someone.
So I think we'll open it up to questions now. But so everyone can feel free to put questions in the chat. While we're doing that, I see there's one there. But if any of you have any sort of parting advice or one thing that you just want to get across, or like to anyone that might be thinking about starting a social enterprise or doing this, any last words of advice or encouragement?
For me, tame, I don't know why this just popped in my head, but tame your creativity and innovation. I have so many ideas. It's like a floodgate of, you should try this. What about this? You can partner with this person. Write all of those things down. Don't feel like you will never tackle them or that you cannot do them, but be willing to tell yourself yes, but later. And then stay consistent on, your priorities. That was huge for me. I wanted to tackle everything. Once it was just like, I'm on my own and no one can tell me no. But I had to really get focused. So I would really say that the biggest thing is being consistent, following through to the very end on whatever it is that you set in motion, before you start adding a bunch of new things to, either, what your services are or products are. Get really good at, core things and then add. So consistency is key, and take small bites.
I would only add that clarity only comes through action. So when you're dealing with a purpose-driven business, so much of it is intuitive and guided by these cares that we have for making feel driven to do something that's going to make the world a better place through your business. Clarity only comes when you're in action. And the more you take a step, and doesn't be everything, but you take that step, you'll start to gain. And everybody's story today kind of speaks to that. We were looking for something different, or we wanted to change, or this wasn't feeding us any longer. But we took that big step in whatever our career was. And then we built upon that. And clarity, and it's always going to continue to come as your business continues to evolve, because it is a living, breathing thing.
Say to the resources question, there are a lot of resources that are free that I would encourage people to explore before getting too deep. I mean, I think there's like a founder gym course that I think is pretty good that you can do there's some free events associated with that really get you focused on what you want to do and why you want to do it. For me, like I was focused on product management. So I read books on product management that I got recommendations from friends in the industry, I guess, so to speak. So I'm trying to think of any other like lean startup. We read Lean Impact for our program. Yep, the podcast is a good one. Yeah, Michelle, you can jump in two of those.
Some that I've really appreciated and learned from. But yeah, there are tons of resources out there. And I really am a big proponent of human-centered design. So, Lean Impact and Business Model Canvas, I think, are really useful and helpful, especially as you're getting started. And yeah, my advice really, and it kind of goes along with what Alysha was talking about earlier, but, I'm the kind of person who was always kind of more of a perfectionist. I always had all my ducks in a row before I even told anyone about it. And so something that I've learned is just being willing to be vulnerable and having the courage to be vulnerable. I'm a big fan of Brené Brown. If you haven't watched her TED Talk, you should. That's part of hearing her talk gave me the inspiration to take the leap and actually start a business, because I've been dreaming about it for a long time, but just was too risk averse to do it. And, you're going to put products or services out there and they're not going to be perfect. And you have to be okay with that, but then learn from it and then quickly update them, improve them, and make them better by listening to customer feedback. So just having the willingness to be vulnerable and to put yourself out there, and then people will come to you, and you'll get kind of that feedback that you need to succeed.
Thank you all. We have like one more minute. It looks like there was a question about what frameworks or models did you use as inspiration? Any of you want to talk to that a little bit?
Well, I have to say Finnegan's Brewery was a big inspiration. I moved here. when I heard about a brewery, I'm like, well, I have to buy beer anyway. And if it gives back to the community, like that's two things I love. So, you know, Jackie Berglund has been a mentor, and just Finnegan's Brewery has been a huge inspiration for my model.
I would echo that. Going back to 2015, when I spent the time networking, I didn't realize Jackie at the time was building out her dream, or this model of FINNOVATION Lab. I think it was like in 2017 when I met her, but she opened her calendar. I reached out to her. I'm like, I want to learn about social impact businesses. I reached out to her, and she met with me 4 times over that time when I was kind of putting my business plan together, to tell me about her journey of being a social entrepreneur. And, you know, because she was using beer and, you know, food insecurity, like just everything about what she was doing. So again, it was reaching out. She did not have to say yes. I didn't even know she would say yes. And in spite of being so busy, she opened up her calendar. And that's what really got me started. So tap into those resources in our community. There's so many.
So true.
Well, we are at time, but thank you all so much. This has been great. Yeah, and I think Connie shared all your websites in the chat. I'm sure all of you are open to connecting with folks if they have further questions. So again, thank you all so much. This has been great. Bye.
Thank you.